talk about mindfulness of emotions. And to introduce mindfulness of emotions, I want to share a short personal story. My dad was a World War II war refugee from Estonia, and he landed in a refugee camp in Germany at a real difficult time in history. So he spent his formative years scared and hungry. But he had fun, like kids do. And it was difficult, but the family made it to the US and they assimilated. And he became an Eagle Scout, and he married an American woman, my mom. He became a workaholic, so he was a real American. But based on these conditions, his experiences, his family, his environment, the causes and conditions of his life, Dad was a guy who could get really lost in his emotions. So he was either sky high or in a black hole. And nowadays, the psychologists would happily slap a label on him like bipolar or manic depressive. Me, I watched and I learned the causes and conditions of my life, that experiencing emotions is dangerous. Emotions make you unstable. So I developed ways to avoid my emotions. And it was, obviously my techniques were helpful to me at the time, but it created residual behaviors and thought patterns that were quite harmful to me. It turns out emotions are not dangerous at all. In fact, running away from emotions is dangerous. In fact, sensing your emotions safely is an essential part of being truly happy. So what is an emotion? It's a fleeting physical sensation created by your body to provide input about this moment right here. So it's a fleeting physical sensation, an emotion. And we'll understand in a minute where the thoughts come into that, right? But emotions are physical. Like, why do we have them? Like, why do we even have these emotions? Well, they're physical indicators that were developed over millions of years by Mother Nature to protect us. So take fear, for example. If you see a snake-like shape on the ground as you're walking in the forest, the emotion of fear comes up. You can feel it in your chest. Your muscles tighten, and this primal feeling propels you to jump away. Even before you lose time deciding, is this a snake or a vine? Right? So it's a protective mechanism, very primal. Nowadays, we don't walk in the wild usually. We don't live in straw huts without a lock on the doors. So, we're not usually at risk of grave physical harm in the course of our day-to-day life. So we're lucky, but we have this emotional system that's hardwired into our bodies, and it's always activated. So we have to be aware. We have to know what's this system doing to us? Like how is it interacting? How is it interfacing with our life? Something the researchers found out somewhat recently, and I think this is a really important fact to take in. Emotions, these physical body sensations, last on average 60 to 90 seconds in the body. 60 to 90 seconds. It's a very short-lived physical sensation. That's it. Now, the problem is when the thoughts get involved, because the thoughts feed the emotions. It's like fuel to a fire. So we have this very efficient system that can take care of something quickly, but then the mind gets involved. So the practice, mindfulness of emotions, is when an emotion comes through you, you sit with it, you watch it, and you ride it out. You say, okay, 60 to 90 seconds, let me see if I can do this. Number one, you feel what's happening in your body. Number two, you let go of the story. You drop it into the river. Can you stay with this uncomfortable physical sensation of heat or vibration or whatever it is for 60 to 90 seconds? And if you can't, you just move on. You can try again later because these things come up all day, every day. But if you can stay with it, do it. Because that's where your freedom lives. So here's a list of some common emotions that humans feel, okay? Amazed, anxious, comfortable, hopeful, hurt, miserable, motivated, stupid, suspicious, uncomfortable, worried. It's a long list. It's a good list. And some of these emotions cross over each other and they intertwine with each other. And they offer a lot of possibilities of what we can feel in any given moment. And each of us is so different, right? Some people feel emotions that others don't even have access to, right? This is really important to remember when we're interacting with others. So these emotions are like a gold mine of information for us if we don't get lost in them, right? Okay, so each of those, that long list of emotions that I partially read off, each of those can be distilled into four main categories, and these are known as the primary emotions, these four buckets: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. These are the only emotions we had access to as infants up to about 3 years old, I believe. I think dogs also have these four primary emotions. So, for example, the complex emotion of annoyed would go into mad, right? When you're annoyed, it's a little bit of a mad feeling. Lonely would go into sad. Excited would go into glad. And lost might go into afraid. I don't know where I am. So every complex emotion can be traced back to one of these four primals. And this is very helpful when things get complicated. You can have this more simple map. What am I feeling right now? And interestingly, each of us has a go-to emotion of the four primaries, meaning there's one that shows up for you more repeatedly. For instance, I'm a worrier. I'm generally a pretty relaxed person, but my go-to would be afraid. I'm worried that this will happen. I'm afraid that that will happen. My husband's, even though he's not an angry person, you would never say that of him, but his primal energy is anger. So mad would be his go-to. So if you trace your feelings back, you find that one of the four is dominant. And this is helpful just to be aware of what's going on inside of you. And similarly, everyone has one of the four that we've been conditioned to repress. So somehow in your development, you were taught that one of these four is not okay, something in the family or something in the environment. Now, in the emotions thoughts cycle is this adding the fuel to the fire, right? Emotions can trigger thoughts, and thoughts can trigger emotions. So, for instance, you can get a thought that triggers a feeling. For instance, you think about a small child, maybe your granddaughter. You think that thought and you have a feeling of happiness come up, right? You can also get a feeling, an emotion that triggers a thought, like you hear a loud crash sound outside, you feel scared, and you think maybe it's a car accident, right? So you can see where this goes. They're intimately connected because we have these tremendous imaginations and they feed on each other. And in regular life, we're not scavenging around for food all day. So, we have a lot more time to fester. So this feedback loop kind of happens on a chronic scale. The idle mind is a devil's playground, right? So when somebody doesn't get back to your email or text, the creative mind goes off and then your emotions start getting charged up, and then the cycle continues. It's almost like our thoughts are kerosene, They keep the emotions burning. And because of this, people can really drown. Other people really cleverly just shut it all out. The problem is you can't close yourself off to bad emotions and let only the good ones in. It's impossible to live a full life this way. And our emotional system is too primal. It's not that clever. It doesn't know how to sort it out and say, okay, I'm just going to send you the good stuff and you don't have to have the bad stuff. So if we want to feel joy and happiness, we also have to be willing to feel anger and fear. We don't need to act out in anger or fear, but we have to be willing to feel it. Right? It's like the day and the night, happiness and sadness. It's not personal, it just is. So we have to know how to take care of these unpleasant emotions. Basically, if you know how to feel bad skillfully, you can feel really good. So how do we do this? How do we take care of our emotions? The first thing we do is we get curious about the emotions in our body. We know that the emotion is there. We are a scientist. So how is this showing up for me right now? For instance, when you get angry, do you feel a tightness in your throat? Like, does something happen to your hands? Do your fists tingle? Is your chest on fire? When you feel sad, does your body feel heavy? Does your head maybe ache? Does your face feel lifeless? Is there a lump in your throat when you're sad? When you feel fear, is there a knot in your stomach or like a vibration in your chest? Just getting familiar with your body's particular response to your emotions. And then practicing enduring that physical sensation for its lifetime, which is 60 to 90 seconds. Learning to redirect your attention to the body sensations and let go of the thoughts that are fueling it. They'll come back, don't worry, they'll be there. But see if you can pay attention to the emotion as it's showing up for you. I want to show you a chart now, and we'll do an emotions exercise. So I'll describe it a little bit. It's a chart of 14 human bodies, and each one is labeled with a different emotion: anger, fear, happiness, sadness, neutral, pride, contempt, depression. And each of the bodies has the colors from blue to yellow, and red and black. So each of the bodies has been colored in. And what this represents is there was a huge study done in Scandinavia where thousands of people recorded with colored pencils where emotions show up for them, and where they feel activated is yellow. So for instance, you can see in the happiness, yellow shows the face, in particular, I don't know if you can see it, but the eyes and around the mouth is almost white. It's so activated and bright. And the chest is bright. And the body is red and warm. And so the common human experience of the emotion of happiness is this brightness in the face and chest and a warmth over the body. And then compare that with the feeling of depression. There's a blank in the chest and the abdomen. It's blank, no sensations. And the limbs, the arms and legs are even cold. It's a light blue, ice blue, cold. So a lack of sensations. You know, that feeling when you're really depressed, you kind of shut down. And so each of these is very instructive. It's very helpful, especially because we're not used to looking for these things in our body. We're used to being brains on legs. We just think through our day. But the body is an absolute wealth of information for us that can alert us to how we're really feeling, right? Not how we're supposed to be feeling right now. So go ahead now and think about a situation now that has an emotion connected to it. And pick something really easy, not too complicated, but and don't pick something that's connected to the worst feelings you had lately. I mean, you're certainly welcome to, but... And close your eyes now, or just stare at the floor or something, and think of the name of the emotion that you picked and say it to yourself. And call up in your mind's eye the situation where you felt this emotion. Things that might have been said or heard or seen. And while you have this emotion, this situation of emotion in your mind, identify how do you experience that emotion in your body? Where does it show up for you physically? Is there heat, pressure, tingling, tightness, heaviness? And if you can't feel it yet, that's okay. Keep bringing the emotion up with your thoughts, so feed that fire. Keep looking for a sensation in the body if it hasn't come already. Maybe a tightness in the chest, heaviness, lightness. Bring the situation into your mind one last time. And try to get your attention away from the story now and just focus entirely on the body sensations. And see if you can feel these sensations subside naturally of their own accord. Okay. Now, if you selected an emotion that was maybe a difficult emotion, let's do it again and try one that's a pleasant emotion. Or if you selected a pleasant one first, now select an emotion that's unpleasant. So finding the opposite energy. And again, think of the name of this emotion you pick for yourself and say it to yourself. And then call up to your mind's eye a situation where you felt this way. Things that were said or heard or seen. And then with the situation in your mind, identify how do you experience that emotion in your body. And again, if it's not showing up, that's perfectly fine. It's not second nature. But see if there's some lightness or heaviness, some pressure or release somewhere, the shoulders, the chest, the face. And then again, trying to focus on the body sensations and letting the emotion dissipate on its own. Just keeping the attention in the body. So I hope that's slightly helpful. I find that chart to be, for me, it's particularly helpful because I'm of the nature to be very much in my head. And just knowing that that these feelings are here embodied. It can be so overwhelming when we do get caught in that feedback loop, right? When the thought that you keep having keeps fueling those emotions, especially when it's a very difficult one. But knowing what you're feeling, knowing what that feeling is physically, what it's doing to your body, is freedom. When you don't know, when you're cut off, which we just are, it's just a fact of life. When we're cut off, we can't tend to things well. We can't tend to things well. If we know that we're anxious, if we know that we're afraid, maybe our request to another person is more genuine. You know, I'm very afraid now. Could you help me? Instead of maybe creating a whole bunch of stories to maybe convince someone to help us, right? But maybe if we could share that very authentic emotion It's a straighter, easier path. So this is our practice. This is our practice. We keep coming back to our body, remembering it and keeping our attention there.